Hi, I'm Catherine. In the society, I'm known as Lady Catherine Coscombe. I am the seneschal of the Shire of Rivenvale in the Kingdom of the Middle. Mundanely, I am actually a theatrical costume designer, so that's sort of my jam. I do theater in mundane life. Um, and so I worked on this class to talk about a point in theater that we don't necessarily talk a lot about. I noticed that a lot of the theater classes in the SCA focus on late period, particularly Shakespearean, Elizabethan, Golden Age theater, or really early stuff like the Greeks and Romans, who are kind of pre-period, and commedia. While one of the biggest forms of theater in the Middle Ages gets a little neglected. So that's really what I want to talk about is this very specifically medieval style of theater. I have a handout, and I am going to link the handout in the comments. So that should have got, yes, that went. Which is just sort of a collection of notes. It also includes a couple of my sources. One of the best, if you're interested in learning about theater history, not just medieval theater history, but theater history in general, the book that I recommend the most, and it's an old book, and the guy that wrote it's been dead for a good 8 years at this point, but Oscar Brockett's History of Theater, if you can get an old edition. Hi, Dimitri, if you can get, a used version. It is often called the Bible of medieval of theater history in general. It has a ton of information. It's really fascinating. I've got 7. 7 seems like a good number, right? Comments, if you guys think 7 is a good number, go with it. So once again, hi, I'm Catherine, and we are going to talk about medieval theater. So to get started, we're going to talk a little bit about, I have my own handout with me just in case. So we're going to talk a little bit about theater in the West before the Middle Ages, because you sort of need to understand the context that leads into the Middle Ages. In the West, theater emerged first in ancient Greece, sometime in the 5th century BCE. Aristotle penned the first treatise, kind of defining and outlining and saying what theater is in 335 BCE, his Poetics. So Greek drama was both civil and religious. And this is going to be a thing that we see once again when we get into the Middle Ages, theater being both a civil and religious form. The Romans, being thieves, stole theater outright. They took the style, they took the form, they added more blood and guts because Rome. So you've got both tragic and comic forms in ancient Rome. Tragic form, we've got Seneca surviving. Comic form, we have Terence and Plautus. Fun fact of the day, Terence is very likely our first recorded African playwright. He also is very popular in the Middle Ages. Rome wasn't super keen on scripted drama. Lots of live entertainment was really active in Rome. Dance, juggling, acrobats, gladiatorial games. Heck, they flooded the Colosseum and had naval battles, They also had a form called mime. And mime is not like Marcel Marceau, whiteface, I'm trapped in a box, mime. I tend to talk fast. If I'm talking too fast or you've got questions, please do mention something. Mime is actually a style of improvised theater that often satirized daily life or made fun of those high tragedies and mythic figures. The humor's pretty blue, because Romans. It also featured, very controversially to the Christian church, this will come into play, it also featured I would love to do a naval battle, yes. It also featured female performers, unmasked female performers. And you can see a lot of ties between what's happening with mime and what will happen later in Italy with commedia. So you've got this kind of raunchy blood and guts theater, because, you know, like if the Greeks, if somebody dies, they go off stage, they come back, and they're like, you know, I've stabbed out my eyes, but you don't watch them stab out the eyes. If they kill somebody, they go off stage, and a messenger comes back, oh, I've killed somebody. The Romans, if they're going to kill somebody, they're going to do it on stage. With Medea, like when Jason's like, what happened to my kids? And she's like, you're eating them. She starts like throwing gobbets of meat at him. It's graphic. So it's graphic. It's depicting violence. It's got a lot of sex. As you can imagine, as the Christian church came into increased power, they're like, you know, I'm not digging this theater thing. One, it's kind of pagan because, of course, it was tied to a pagan religion. Two, they're really concerned about the morals that it's showing on stage. They're offended by the sexual content. They're offended by the evil characters, because if there's an evil character being depicted, that might normalize immortality. It's like the moral majority saying, you know, if you see a villain in a cartoon, you're going to think the villain's okay. So basically, as the church gained more power, they condemned theater more and more. Quite frankly, flat out banning it. To the extent that at the Council of Elvira in 302, they actually said that actors were such bad, immoral people, they could only be baptized if they quit theater. So actors were like really persona non grata. If you attended theater on a holy day, you could be excommunicated. Actors could not take communion. They couldn't be buried in a churchyard. So the church came down real hard on theater because they're like, we are not doing that. So when we look at theater in the early Middle Ages, it functionally disappears for about 500 years. The church is just like, nope, it's not going to happen. Now, of course, people love to tell stories. People love to act things out. So even though theater is really heavily condemned by the church and officially banned, that doesn't mean that there's not stuff going on. So it's sort of limping along on these bare little threads. There are references to wandering minstrels, acrobats, jugglers, and histriones who were, to quote, as bad as mimes in terms of their moral character. In Northern Europe, where they converted a bit later, you still have the Scope, who is a wandering minstrel who would tell tales of Teutonic heroes. But of course, when the tribes got Christianized in the 8th century, the Scope is also branded as infamous. Infamous is a real term. Infamous is a church term. You know, we think about it now like somebody is scandalously famous, and that's infamous. But back then, being infamous was like, you are a bad person, and the church doesn't like you. So the church is saying it's pagan, it's licentious, it's a source of corruption. Augustine called theater a satanic plot to corrupt souls and a mocker of God's creation. So yeah, it's not a good time. I have notes about Byzantium, and I could talk about Byzantium if anybody wants me to. Doesn't look that way, so I'm going to keep going. So church is really a thing. But even though there's not formal theater being performed, and we've got some infamous minstrels, plays haven't gone away, particularly Roman plays. And the reason we have surviving Roman plays is largely due to the church. In particular, Terence, of the two comedians, Terence is the most popular in the Middle Ages. Yes, I will talk about Byzantium. Let me talk about Terence and I'll cycle back. Terence has, well, if you think about it, plays have dialogue, right? Terence has really accessible Latin. And so what do you think you're going to do if you're trying to teach all of these nuns and monks Latin to use? Well, you've got great teaching tools. And so Plautus and Terence were used to teach Latin to clergy. So with Byzantium, they did keep plays going after 476, and in some form or another in Byzantium, Theodora was an actress, the Empress Theodora. She had a famous act called Leda and the Swan. And I love talking about Theodora, how Theodora became an empress. She went into theater when she was like 5 or 6 years old as a little kid. So she was dancing on stage from when she was wee tiny. But Leda and the Swan. Leda is like Leda with Zeus and Zeus as a swan, right? So in this act, she would strip down. She was not naked. That would be illegal. She had a belt. Okay? So Theodora, in her belt, would have grain poured on her, and then waterfowl would come and pluck the grain off of her. So you can see how she became empress from that act. They did in Byzantium preserve the manuscripts of classical Greek drama, and actually after the sack of Byzantium, at the sack of Constantinople, the manuscripts were transferred from the Eastern Empire over to Western Europe, and that actually helped fuel the Renaissance. Fun fact of the moment. Constantinople also had the Hippodrome, which was huge for popular entertainment. Lots of chariot racing. Teams were tied to political parties. So if you think like red versus blue is a thing now, you should have seen it back then. So not a lot of scripted drama, but they did still have a lot of popular entertainment. So we're in Western Europe, Dark Ages. You know, I know Dark Ages is kind of a misnomer, but for theater, it's really accurate because there's not a lot going on. We do have some written drama from these early days of the Middle Ages. Most notable is a nun named Roswitha of Gandersheim around 935. She's a German Benedictine nun. And yeah, German nuns, by the way, are great because you also have Hildegard van Bingen, Hildegard, who wrote an opera before operas were a thing. But Roswitha, to educate the novices, wrote religious plays based on Terence's style. They involved a lot of Christian virgins who, through their virtue, you know, performed miracles and were saved and learned moral lessons. But she was really big on Christian virginity and the power of Christian virginity, which, if you're making plays for a bunch of nuns, seems useful. So she has 6 known plays. They are written in Latin. They are probably what are called closet dramas. And a closet drama is a play that is written to be read, but not written to be performed. So have any of you guys been to like a staged reading? It's kind of like that. So people will sit and read out the parts, but it's not really performed. So we've got some stuff going on. We have, yes, she is awesome. Roswitha is great. We also have informal theater. We've got folk plays. The English have a series of Plough Monday plays, or they're enacting The Wild Man in the Woods. Morris dancing has theatrical aspects, sword dances. There are some seasonal festivals, but again, very little going on. So the church, which again, basically banned theater, beat it up, threw it out in the trash bin, right? Even though the church is what got rid of theater, the church is what brings theater back. And so the three lines heard round the world are going to happen in 925 CE. And this is Quem Quirites. And Quem Quirites is the first new publicly performed piece of theater. That is theater as it's kind of formally defined. And what happened is they introduced a trope, a piece of drama into worship, where the priests took on roles. So you've got multiple priests and altar boys and all these people at Mass, and they're enacting, they're taking on a role, not just talking about something, but acting it out. And so Quem Quirites basically consists of the Marys coming to the tomb, being like, we're at the tomb. And the angel's like, who you looking for? And the Marys are like, we're looking for Jesus. And the angel is, he's not here. He rose. That's it. It's in Latin, and it sounds way fancier in Latin. But that's it. It was a little moment in the Easter Mass. 4 lines. But the thing is, this is representative performance. And just like when Thespis went from I sing of Dionysus to I am Dionysus, going from let's talk about Mary, the Marys, and we are the Marys. Oh, yes. Christopher, yes. I don't quite get that late, but yes. So you've got this thing, and it takes off like Cracker Jacks. Everybody thinks it's awesome. They start adding characters. It gets more elaborate. One church is like, oh, that church did it. We're going to do it. We have over 400 surviving versions of Quem Quirites. And well, you see, unlike that pagan theater, liturgical theater is moral. It's edifying. We're teaching the people about religion. And so it's controlled by the church. It's performed indoors. And it's also performed pretty much entirely in Latin. So you've got this liturgical form of drama. And I can talk a lot about the staging, but I'm already at 7:20 because I get on tangents. Awesome, Eva. So it gets more elaborate. They add it to other masses. They'll add different things. The general style of performance, because if you think about a medieval church, it's mostly empty. So you've got a lot of flat space because, you don't have pews in the Middle Ages. People are standing. And so they had what's called a platea and mansion style staging. And so the platea is just a flat space for the actors to stand. And the mansion is like a little box where they've got the scene set in the box. It's not like modern theater where they're like interacting with the set. So it's like this little shadow box of this is the place behind the actors. And the actors could move from mansion to mansion to mansion. Sometimes the mansions move, sometimes the actors move. But that platea is the flat space. And through the 11th and 12th centuries, the dramas are getting more elaborate. They do start to be performed in vernacular, because if you're doing everything in Latin, a lot of your congregation doesn't speak Latin. But if you say it in vernacular, you can better educate because it's going to be in the language of the people. You actually have these massive church manuals. So we have a lot of records about what was going on because they kept records. This is how you do it. These are the vestments that you wear if you're going to portray an angel or you're going to portray a saint. They have all kinds of manuals and instructions written down about how to do this liturgical drama. Movement, pantomime, tone of voice. So they've got stage directions. These are getting real fancy. By the mid-12th century, liturgical drama is widespread across the continent. Spain's an exception. Spain is weird. Spain doesn't really get interesting until 1590 anyways. But so Spain's kind of outside of this. England, France, Germany have tons of liturgical drama. And when we move into lay religious drama, you're going to see those same three countries just taking it and running with it. The churches, while there's lots of these going on, an individual church probably only does one or two a year. Sometimes they don't do them every year, but they do them every couple of years. They do them on a set cycle. If you think about passion plays, which grow out of this, there's actually a town in Germany Spain is weird. There's a town in Germany that's been doing one every 10 years for the past 400 years. And it involves the whole freaking town. Also in this early period, we do have Hildegard von Bingen, who is awesome. I love her. And in addition to everything else that she was writing, because she was doing a lot of writing, she also wrote short musical plays, which were probably performed in her convent, which she oversaw. She wrote liturgical songs that had accompanying texts. So we've got musical theater, right? Her kind of theater magna opus is Orde Virtuum, the Play of Virtues, which, much like Roswitha was doing, these seem to foreshadow the later morality plays. Oh, I am so sorry, Eva. That is tragic. Hopefully you'll get to go. So Ordo Virtuum, and it's on YouTube. You should check it out. It's epic. We also have in England in the 14th century, Catherine of Sutton, who's writing short dramatic texts. So there's a lot of women actually writing these things too. But as the liturgical drama gets bigger and more elaborate and more complex, it starts hitting its limits. You can only get so big inside the church. And of course, the priests and the clergy have other responsibilities than just making plays. So by 1300, it's sort of hit its limit. It's peaked the form. Now, it doesn't stop. It just doesn't really change much. There's another 300 years where you're still seeing liturgical drama in the church, but by 1300, what's going to happen is the theater is going to move outside. And when the theater moves outside, who controls the theater is also going to change. So while liturgical drama inside the church is really tightly controlled by the clergy, largely but not exclusively in Latin, when it moves outside, it starts being taken over by lay people. And so we have lay religious vernacular theater. So that sounds like a big mouthful of description for what's happening. So moving outside, well, who's going to do these plays? This lay theater, that really depends on where you're at. Who does the theater when it moves outside depends a lot on what country you're in. In England, it is largely performed by guilds. In France, you've got confraternities, which are groups of people specifically getting together to do these plays. Sometimes you've got rich sponsors who are doing it, but it's usually groups of people. And of course, when it's moving into guilds, the guilds like to pick subject matter that is appropriate to their guild. So if you are a shipwright, you're gonna build the Ark. If you're the Guild of Vinters, maybe you'll do the wedding at Cana. If you're a fisherman, maybe you're gonna do Jonah. So you're gonna pick a story that kind of goes with your guild. But this transition is from that inside to outside, from Latin to vernacular, from clergy to lay people. This is not the best covered transition period. But we know there's a lot of stuff going on in that early 14th century. And as these vernacular dramas develop, they are developing in two big categories. One category are your mystery plays, sometimes also called your cycle plays. And then another category are your morality plays. Mystery plays are not like, who done it, we got to solve a thing. No, mystery plays are about the mystery of creation. Mystery plays are biblical stories. So passion plays are sort of a subset of the mystery category. Morality plays are plays that tell you how to live a good life, how to be a good person, but they're not based on a specific story. As these plays continue to develop, we see a third type, the 3 M's of medieval theater. The last type are going to be your miracle plays. And miracle plays are plays based on the lives of saints. So saints do miracles, miracle plays. We do have some purely secular drama happening at this time. The earliest secular stuff that we've got in France, 1170, The Mystery of Adam. But it's sort of a weird little outlier. There's like some 6 or so surviving 13th century plays, but there's not a lot of secular material. What you do instead is you take your secular material and you take your comic material and you find ways to mix it in with this morally acceptable religious material. And so when we look at these cycle or mystery plays, they really develop a distinctive style. One of the things, and one of the medieval festivals where you see a lot of production of theatrical stuff, is the Feast of Corpus Christi. And the conceit of the Feast of Corpus Christi is that all of creation, from Genesis to Revelation, all of creation is tied, because the world is ephemeral and we're all going to die and we're all going to leave this plane, blah, right? And so Corpus Christi, the Festival of Corpus Christi, would often show a cycle. And a cycle is any group of little plays designed to be performed together. They might be all performed on the same day. They might be performed over a series of several days, but they're a little set. And with Corpus Christi, you would often have a collection of plays that would show the story of creation, story of the world, starting with Adam and Eve and going to Revelation, and a series of plays that show what's going on in between. But stylistically, some stuff that's going on, because everything's kind of happening at once, our contemporary linear sense of this is now, this was then, this didn't happen back then, isn't really a thing. So with these mystery plays and cycle plays, you see a ton of anachronisms. So you'll have Old Testament characters, you know, saying their bidding their bods, or talking about Jesus, or talking about the Pope, even though there was no Pope back when Moses was being Moses. It doesn't matter. Moses knows who the Pope is because we're doing a play and we don't care about continuity. So it would definitely drive a modern person a little batty watching it. So, and they also included humor to liven it up because they're having fun with this. My favorite mystery play is The Second Shepherd's Play, which is an English play, and it's about the shepherds who are going to attend. The angels are going to come to the shepherds and tell them to go see baby Jesus. So, right, that's nativity shepherds. But all of that happens in the last 2 pages of the play. Most of the play, they're making jokes about how cold it is, about how fat their wives are, and about there's this comically evil sheep stealing couple, and the shepherds have to find the sheep that was stolen by the evil sheep stealing couple, and they've hid the sheep, wrapping it up like a baby. I mean, it's a whole thing. And it's doing all of these shenanigans for like 9 out of the 10 minutes that this play runs. And then they're like, oh wait, there's an angel. We're doing religion, so we're going to go do religion now. And you see a lot of plays that do this. They are doing other things, and they kind of have to hit the main notes, and they insert jokes. I totally went off on a tangent. I am so sorry. I lost track of myself. So you've got all of these, and these are really a community event because these aren't professional actors. These are members of the guilds playing these roles, and they're making the sets, and they're making the costumes, and they're building this whole thing. And so it's delightfully community oriented and delightfully amateur in the 14th century. They love the spectacular. They figure out special effects. They'll have mouths of hell that spout fire and smoke. They'll use mirrors to give people halos. In the town of Mons in present-day Belgium, they used barrels of water to stage the deluge for Noah, and it rained for 5 minutes. That is some impressive stuff, okay? Raining for 5 minutes is a lot of water. So as these go on, these get more, again, as everything, they get more elaborate. You get more plays. They get more organized. So while it used to be, you'll do the Saints play on the Saints' Day, what have you, or you have your Feast of Corpus Christi, you've got these cycles. Cycles can be up to 50 plays. It's not uncommon for different towns to have their own pet cycle. You see this especially in England, where you've got, I've got notes on everyone in England that has a cycle. Thank you. The surviving cycles. We've got the York cycle, the Townley, the Chester, and the N-Town cycle, which have between 21 and 50 plays in these different cycles. So there's a lot of them. We did lose a fair number of cycles in England, and I'm going to get into that. But so we've got, guilds. So one of the things with production, as these are growing, having a good production and having a well-invested production is really seen as an act of devotion. So if you are wealthy and you're giving money and fiscal support to a really good play, that's seen as an act of charity and an act to get you better and closer to the good place. Um, so England, we've got 125 different towns with cycle plays, even though only about 4 cycles remain. The earliest cycles date back to about the 1370s. Corpus Christi. I talked about Corpus Christi. Talked about how it moved out of the church. So the thing that's going to happen, though, with all of these confraternities and guilds and all these plays, even though it starts out largely amateur, people are kind of competitive. We see this especially in Germany. And so as they do this, they get more elaborate. And you hit the limits of what amateurs can do. So what happens is you start getting professionals. So even though this is largely amateur theater and the performers are largely amateur, you actually, in the 14th century and into the 15th century, start to see theatrical professionals. And the first theatrical professionals in the Middle Ages are the techies. See, costume designer, right? I'm a backstage person, so my peeps. Particularly, you see a person known as the Master of Secrets. Isn't that a cool job title? I want to be called a Master of Secrets. And the Master of Secrets is your special effects guy. He's the one that figured out how to make it rain for 5 minutes. He's the one that built this hellmouth that belches fire. He's figured out how to make somebody fly. And the secrets are viciously protected because, that's how you're making your money. And if you're in Munich, you want to do better than Frankfurt. So then you got competing secrets guys. So you are seeing this development of spectacle and of professionalism, even though the performance is definitely broad. There's not a lot of rehearsal time for these. Actors usually provided their own costumes. They don't really try to do historical dress, but they might do something symbolic to make them, I know who this is. Oh, I feel you, Tiffany. Lay actors in England were exclusively male. England's going to stay exclusively male through the end of period. But other countries, Germany and France, do have female performers. France especially has a lot of female performers. These plays are often very ambitious. There's big scope because we're doing Corpus Christi and we're trying to do, all of this stuff. So doubling is common. One person might play 2, 3, 4, 5 different roles. Usually they have fewer than 5 rehearsals before they do this thing. So they're amateurs, they're playing multiple roles, and they only have 5 rehearsals. So you can imagine the level of depth and nuance in this performance, right? So what happens a lot is typecasting. So you are going to pick the biggest, brawniest guy in town to play Samson. You're going to pick, you will find somebody that the role isn't that different from who they are in real life. Because there's less push to change things. Now, because these are amateur actors, they very often took an oath on the Bible to do a good performance, and they would be fined if they missed rehearsal, or disrupted a rehearsal, or were drunk at a rehearsal. So they took it pretty seriously, but again, amateurs. let's see. With these miracles, I'm jumping. I am so sorry. I'm jumping around. Talked about the Master of Secrets. Ooh, fun thing with Master of Secrets. Also Belgium. One production in 1501 needed 17 people to operate the hell machinery. Even with these places, they moved outdoors. They kept a lot of that style that we saw inside the church, that platea, that flat performing space, and then mansions behind. And so when you have the stage set up for a bunch of plays, you'd have heaven on one end and hell on the other, and then different stations in between. Yeah, flaming hellmouths, fabric draped platforms for heaven, also called the glories. They had trapdoors. So I mean, there's a lot going on. Cornwall is weird. Cornwall has circular amphitheaters. So just look at the Cornish and just be like, what are you doing? You also, in particularly in England and in Spain, have processional staging. So instead of one stage with little mansions, they took the mansions and put them on a cart. And so you've got a pageant wagon, which is a movable stage. And these wagons, like a parade float, could go through the streets. We're not quite sure entirely what these look like. We've got different descriptions of them. Some of them, you read the description, you're like, that cannot be right. So there's ideas that maybe there's a stage that drops down and they perform on that. There's ones where you've got the mansion and then a separate flat cart that goes in front. Oh, hello, Bianca. But we're not quite sure exactly what the pageant wagons look like. In Spain, they're going to turn into the auto sacramentals, holy cars. But again, Spain is weird and Spain is late. So Spain's doing everything a couple decades or a couple centuries after everybody else. With these pageant wagons, they are just like you would see in France where they've got stationary staging. You still have like, this is this guild's wagon. And so they're responsible for building it. They're responsible for the effects. And as they process through the streets, they'll repeat the performance for a new crowd. Again, these are usually really short plays. They're 10, 15 minutes. With the pageants, you also have, again, introduction of paid professionals. You have your pageant masters. And the pageant master, their job is to supervise the mounting of this play on the wagon. And once again, they are paid professionals. And their duties might include, might not be all, but finding people to build the scenery, as well as getting seating for the audience, because, you don't really have random risers in the streets. Supervising the building, making sure the machines are all there, selecting and rehearsing the performers. So they're a technical director, a producer, an artistic director. They're kind of a one-man band. Disciplining the performers. So if the performers, broke their oath, it would be up on the pageant master to find them. Sometimes they would collect money. It depends on where and when you are. A lot of these plays, particularly in France, where they're still very religious and tied to festivals, are free. England, they're trying to make some money here. So they've got to get people to collect money. They also would try to get an audience. So your pageant master is also your barker. So that's one guy with a lot of jobs going on. I do want to talk a little, I said bouncing around. With the miracle plays, while again, you can consider them sort of a subset of the mystery play, um, as they focus on the saints, the miracle plays really become super controversial later in the period as we move towards the Renaissance. Because, and just like the mystery plays, because they're inserting humor or they're getting a lot of lay people theology. And you know that person on Facebook that has a lot of theology, and you're like, I'm not quite sure where you picked this up. Just picture them writing plays, and that's a lot of what's going on with the mystery and miracle plays. In miracle plays, the most popular subject, far and away, I bet you guys can guess, be surprised, this is my shocked face, is Mary. Mary is the most popular subject. Nicholas is rank. He's up there. So Mary and Nicholas are the most popular. But you also get some really nasty stuff going on with the miracle plays, because the other really popular subject for miracle plays are two saints that are kind of notorious by modern standards. You have Little Saint Hugh, and you have William of Norwich. Little Saint Hugh and William of Norwich are basically the same story. It is a Christian baby who was, this is really terrible, guys. I'm just going to apologize. It is a Christian baby who was then, as part of the blood libel myth, was kidnapped, murdered, and desecrated by the community, by a community of Jews. And then, of course, they would say that Jewish people did all kinds of terrible things to this little baby who is now a saint. And after these plays were performed, you would often see an explosion of anti-Semitic violence. So you've got these saints who are very popular in theater, that are really apocryphal and really awful. So popular miracle plays. Morality plays really start to come around in the 15th century. They thrive primarily between 1400 and 1550. And while the cycle plays are sort of chaotic and often comic and don't necessarily take themselves super seriously, morality plays are here to tell you how to be. And they take themselves very, very seriously. Their themes included the choice between good and evil, the transitory nature of life, the immediacy of death. Are you prepared for death? There's one called The Virtuous Man and the Dissolute Man, and it is, I kid you not, this is a 5-hour play. Virtuous man, dissolute man. The virtuous man gives alms. The dissolute man spends his money wastefully. It's like, do you guys remember Goofus and Gallant? It's Goofus and Gallant with Catholicism for 5 hours. It takes itself very seriously. And it's easy to like joke about morality plays, but we still make them. Watch almost any kid's cartoon, and you've got the same thing going on. They're instructing people how to be a good person. It's good to share. Don't talk back to your parents. Don't lie. And you've got characters which are as thin as a piece of paper telling you how to do this. Exactly. So you've got some early ones. As said, Hildegard's Ordo Virtuum is like a morality play, but it's way early. A lot of Hroswitha stuff is morality based, but again, way early. So these morality plays, particularly by the early 16th century, are actually not amateur. These are largely performed by professional actors. And because they're professional actors, you see more attempts at controlling the audience because you need to collect money. If you're doing an amateur play for a public festival, collecting money is not as important, but morality plays, which are, professional, so you start to see ways of controlling theater and controlling the audience because they need to get paid. They need to make money. These plays are largely allegorical. So, let's talk about Everyman. The main character's name is Everyman. And yes, they do become propaganda pieces. We're going to talk about that. And Everyman he has to die. And he's going to go see Death. And he's like, well, I'm scared of Death. And Death's like, you can bring somebody. And he goes and he finds cousins and fellowship. And guess what? His kin and his friends, they aren't going to go with him. And he tries knowledge, and knowledge won't go with him, and beauty and money and material goods. None of them, they're characters. They're like people, but they're not people. None of them will go with him except for good deeds. Good deeds will go with him to death. So that's your lesson. Good deeds are the only thing you can take with you. So you've got these allegorical characters. They're really stark. They're very black and white. They're really popular. I think they're awful. I'm sorry. I'm going to admit it. Most of them are really, really obnoxious to a modern audience. The cycle plays are at least having some fun. Oh shoot, we're getting close to 8, so I'm gonna not get too late on things. So morality plays, instructive on Christian virtue, but they don't do explicit biblical stories. So the thing that's going to happen to medieval theater, we're going to blame the Germans again. Hey, this is apparently a class about Germans. In Germany, you have this guy named Martin Luther. All right? Martin Luther nails a piece of paper up onto a door and is like, yo, I got some issues with the church. This one guy is going to set off a whole string of crazy consequences. All right? Because what's going to happen is you are going to have the Protestant Reformation. And so you've got Protestants breaking out everywhere. Protestants are just breaking out like hives. And, well, they have this European tradition of amateur, vernacular, religious theater. And how are you going to tell stories? How are you going to talk about things? You're going to use theater. So what you see happening is, just like they talked about, they start using all of these religious plays as propaganda. Jesus says that the Catholics are idolaters and they're going to go to hell. Jesus says that the Protestants are heretics and they're going to go to hell. So what happens? You're just seeing all of these plays which are just fueling the fire between Protestant and Catholic groups. And while the Reformation is super nasty and super messy and super violent, the one thing the Catholics and the Protestants managed to agree on is, you know what? We shouldn't have Jesus on stage saying everybody's going to hell. And so in the Council of Trent, the Catholic Church bans religious plays, in part because of propaganda. But the other reason they ban them, we talked about, Little St. Hugh and sheep stealing people and body comedy. It's also because these Catholic lay theater plays are being used by the Protestants to make the Catholic Church look bad. And so they're like, well, we gotta we got to control what's being put out there. So the Catholics like just stop doing it. And now mystery cycles do continue through the Reformation in England. They continue until about 1548, when England abolished the Feast of Corpus Christi. A lot of the plays got rewritten or edited, cutting scenes honoring the Virgin, doing stuff to try to make them less Catholic. But by 1569, they were completely suppressed. So I said we've lost a lot of cycles. They were simply destroyed. The ones that we have surviving were often edited to reflect what's going on with Protestantism in England. And so you've got just squashing of all of this religious theater from both Catholic and Protestant ends. And so that leaves secular theater. And there's not a lot of secular theater, but it is there. You do have Latin plays which continue to be studied. They're rarely staged. May Day festivals, mummers, those continue. One thing you see are interludes. And interludes are a little theatrical piece which is staged between the courses of a banquet. You also have folk plays and farce, which farce is very irreverent. It's about the imperfections and scandals of human behavior. So you've got adultery and hypocrisy and drunkenness. So it's very satirical and very naughty. Yeah, England is weird. Elizabeth, you are quite right. You do have a smattering of Latin language secular plays between the 12th and 15th centuries, again, mostly in France. There is even a medieval secular vernacular musical, the Le Jeu de Robin et Marion. So it's about Robin and Marion, but not that Robin and Marion. It's French. It is an entirely different Robin and Marion. Go figure. So you do have some stuff, but the morality plays, which are not explicitly religious, and they already have professionals and they're edging towards secular, that's what's going to turn into your professional theater. And when we start moving into Renaissance theater, you start to see those companies developing, and a real shift from religious subjects to secular subjects, histories and dramas and comedies. That's all going to be happening in the 1500s. You also, of course, have your burgeoning Renaissance, because remember, Constantinople got sacked. And so all of these Greek and Roman materials got moved to the West, and they're being rediscovered. And so it's French by Adam de la Halle. So I will find you resources on that, Robin. So you've got that going on, and they're like, oh, we've got a new interest in these. And so Italy actually starts staging some surviving Greek and Roman works. But as said, with the Reformation, that sort of just killed that medieval religious amateur style. With modern theater, we do see medieval influence continuing. The musical Pippin is actually stylistically very appropriate, and it pulls a lot of stuff from medieval theater. Jesus Christ Superstar and Godspell are basically passion plays. Bertolt Brecht, in his epic theater, made a lot of use of the non-realism and allegory found in medieval theater as a rejection of hyperrealism and Stanislavski and stuff that's going on So you see medieval theater still continuing to influence modern theater. I'm running out of voice and I'm running a little late, but do we have any questions? If we don't have questions, I won't answer questions. I mean, I did just try to cover like 600 years in an hour, so, you know. So, all right, if we don't have any questions, my email is on the handout. You can message me on Facebook. I'm happy to link you to resources that I have, or go, you can, you know, message me, what have you, because I do love this stuff. Thank you guys for coming to my class. I really appreciate it. Have a great night, and I'm gonna end this video.